We have some Indian participants.
Oh, Indian people.
Main timing.
Okay. Okay.
More relaxed.
More or less. That's good. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Kendorjila.
Ningundele kana ningundele.
The shocking also Kashung Majo share Rasra. Shocking Kashung Majo thing share the Rasra. And the inju comes some la shena. Ninjum means yati. There comes some co count equivalent by Naya. Covid needs a Dungale Mandevas. Dungale Mandevas. Kanji Dunga Korano Cortege. Negab Gideva some young by Naya. Any Dunga young dage. Kanji Tabatembo Yigdemevach. And then she Euros that are once missing on some down. Once we carry Tobaina, carry Chombaina. And Yigdem Mevach. Drinki we on the sunny made the use. Tandaki we are in a difficult issue. Tamandu on there. Once Missy Corona did Coragan, the Euros. One leg matching in Kivu Papa with the Pecumbre Dasra. And when it Tawayabu in Devana gives you the things that is. And cannot put us on Anyam beyond Tawachin, then I gives you rest.
So this morning we spoke, I spoke quite broadly, but coming straight back to the topic we concluded with, and that's the recognition that the three realms, that as long as one remains bound within them, one will suffer. The fear that needs to, or the recognition that needs to arise is that wherever one is born, as long as it's a rebirth in samsara, one will suffer. One may and will experience some happiness, but it's fleeting. And that happiness can never satisfy one. Suffering always follows. And we can recognize this from what we have experienced and what we observe in the human realm. No matter who someone is, whether they are amongst the great and the good, or the lowly, the very wealthy and famous, or just the ordinary, we recognize no one experiences any happiness that is anything other than fleeting. Happiness doesn't last, but suffering, problems, and difficulties befall us almost continuously. This is the understanding that we need to cultivate so as to give up a clinging to cyclic existence. With all that being said, within cyclic existence, the way that one can live with the happiest of minds, the least of problems and difficulties, is living well within the vows. So such as the vows that are ordained as a monk or nun, living well within those vows. Then one has really achieved the best possible existence within samsara, but it's still within samsara. That's all.
디 안주 무연내서 지기 레도스라 산점내딩 송바 짬마인바 무연내서야 안주 메세디 뇽진 쳔보 뇽진
Mungxing Chimpo. Mungxing.
뇽진 that and 뇽드사오 메세디 뇽드사오지 레도스라 메세디 뇽드사오디 임바디 아니 ko rangshen revesla na di lagyo samares di nyogda sawo di ko gyugenjila ten chons ro nyogda sawo di gyugenjila ten chons di chagiyores inza gyugen khandajila ten chons ngone nyogda sawo di gyugen khandajila ten chons da leda nyumol ten chons kils tisungoras ro the dean by the leather new moon yotan your marisati, showing on the theory. Then, but his on the tani, the kanji and Dindiki leather new moon said, Kadulerisano, give Toma Mivan led the Mato Chick, Toma Yodevatot. Manzo Sam singing the Toma Meva Shagora. Sam the Toma Mevina. Sem gikonilani and ledeyada tomamivach. Yungures. But Dindigi that le kuninanshiki, Numu singing, Lodi, Tomamivani Yumbayana, who moon candidates.
The Tamagana? Tamati?
Sem Gundi, Sem dig Mundi.
Thinking all there.
Yeah, and it's same thing in Zandante. Right. Let the new be same. New be same. New be same like Mambushan, then Desha Shadan so Mambushan. He's our Maribatisha. Maribati that so that number Sanji Vichu Nang Sama Soyaki. Nimbu Tangos a Tuti, Maribat Shagdasra. These are Maribat candidates. Maribi that's all candidates. Maribi yul tatsu nanshingi yul di tether the true yomar said that Shendon in Nengachi Tichagores. That this only Maribi tatsu hakugore, Maribi tatsu hako tone, Maribi tawa nanshingi pigi Tassi yul the Taran Koran troop do mudu tayadita cheba chigi over the Dichagores. That Dichaba cheni. Tatsu Nanshinji troop mebaina, the Maribu Tatsu Loba Chag, Loba Drugoras. Timbaina Tatsu Nanshi troop mebadi, Nanzuchevachin, even Yavaina, the Maribu Lord Doya Yavadita, Namasanji Vishonla, any Drugudastra.
The reality of our situation. And this is a situation for all of us as individuals and everyone who is bound within the suffering realms of samsara, is that problems, suffering, and difficulties are our almost constant companions. Sometimes they're a little less. Sometimes they're not that strong and dominant. At other times, it's as if problem upon problem befalls us. It's like problems are raining down upon us. This is the very situation that we find in our lives, in the lives of all samsaric beings. That it is like this is not due to the nature of beings. Rather, it has come about in dependence on causes and conditions. Would express it slightly differently. This situation of being bound within these suffering realms of samsara, this is not something that just happens, birth has come about independence on causes and conditions. Recognizing that, one will want to know what are those causes, and they are contaminated karma and afflictions. It's independence on the karma that we accumulated and our own afflictions that we create our samsaric existence. And this isn't something that we have only recently, this isn't a situation we haven't only recently been subject to, but has been our situation, our lived experience since beginningless time. And the reason we can say that this has been our situation since beginningless time is that our mind has no beginning. Our mind itself is beginningless. And it's through our mind that we create a contaminated karma. Therefore, we've been accumulating contaminated karma ripened by our afflictions since beginningless time. But that it comes about independent on causes means that the situation is independent, is impermanent, and therefore can be changed by altering the causes. So when we look at, for example, our afflictions, especially when we look at a deeper level, we see just how commonly they arise. Attachment in particular, as well as anger, jealousy, pride, and so forth. These arise so regularly and with such ease, but they all arise from a single root cause, and that is ignorance. When we recognize that they have a root cause, we know that by eradicating that root cause, all the resulting afflictions and the suffering they create will be extinguished. And the very purpose of the Buddha appearing in our world and teaching is to guide beings to eliminate ignorance. Recognizing that, then the next question is, so what is meant by ignorance? Clearly, this is something very important to understand. So ignorance is, we should understand, to be a particular consciousness or a type of consciousness. And it's ignorant about something. It is ignorant about reality. It perceives reality in a particular way, or to express that differently, it believes that reality exists in a different way. Here, the job of the meditator is to come to recognize how reality appears to us, this reality that ignorance grasps at, believing it exists in this way, and investigate to see whether it exists in the way that it appears. One takes any object, any object of thought, so anything that appears to the mind, comes to see how it appears, and then investigate, does it exist in this way or not? Because how it appears is how we believe it exists. How it appears to our mind is how we believe it exists, and that is not in accordance with reality. That is ignorance. And when we recognize that how things appear is not how they exist, we're developing wisdom that understands reality. And this wisdom that understands reality is directly opposite to the ignorance that misunderstands or misapprehends reality. Cultivating this wisdom and thereby eliminating this ignorance, and this ignorance, remember, which is from which all our afflictions and suffering follow. This is the very purpose of the Buddha Dharma. Lasokan.
Tediri tiza kanji nganzo leta nyumombi ra sem namdo shinjulo je wangi and songchene any nganzo ta kevala rame ondi any geyala rame nganzo mendeshin gedo yoba any mendeshin shido yoba nganzo deva meshin ta ji nama da katre do yoba pipinya da katre do yoba lomba da katre do ya and deva meshin do samlo call towards the leda nyumulia 2 years you see which I was the dindigi so dungar narsu telaya any samni tindig dungar narsu telaya susu tindig dungar narsu telaya it's our meaning deva maybe Mundu logic go yours the dike by not that any ninjong said didn't ask suzu rani leda nyumu wangi any mendition dungar nelaya jorgi up it's telaya mundu logic tela ngang pen nin sen kaduna dili chik mathar nada tim neba chik masu nada sawni ni jig sambi loji yoba na ta ding nginjong said re dosta ding nginjong said res
This process I've just described, this is imperative to first understand, but then really come to recognize that this is how things are. That it's through our afflictions, ripening karmic seeds, that we experience all, we have the experiences we do. For example, that our death, we have no control over it. Our birth, in other words, which realm, to which family, what kind of birth, etc. We have no control over this. It's not something we can will or choose. Likewise, with the details of what goes on in one's life. This all comes down to the karma we've created, and this karma is contaminated because it's been created with the presence of the afflictions, with the involvement of the afflictions. All the suffering that we experience, from the intense manifest suffering to the suffering levels of discontent, ill at ease, all of it comes about through this process. We have no control over it because it's controlled by our karma, which was accumulated under the influence of the afflictions. Thinking about this again and again, we develop a revulsion for this circling in cyclic existence, this revulsion for this prison that we are trapped in. And the key point is we recognize that this is something that is constructed by our own karma and afflictions. Then, and that has, which has as its root ignorance, then a determination arises. I will emerge from these suffering realms of samsara. I will abandon thereby suffering and its causes. So here definite emergence comes about independence on deeply understanding this process of cyclic existence, and that it has as its basis our own karma created with our afflictions, which have as their root ignorance. So definite emergence is the mind that is determined to emerge from the suffering realms of samsara into a state of lasting happiness. And it is a mind that is understands to do so. It is, in particular, ignorance, as well as the accompanying afflictions that need to be abandoned. So this is the mind of definite emergence and how it comes to be generated. Lasso.
dungar gomzu de tagarin sarasra dungar gom gyaondi da demba shi gomondi da dungar gomzu de ya dungar ne sur samya de zu dire dasra mas chigni ko chama di dungar jara te di soundan de isamares dungar gi pra zu kega na chi dungar se kyan le de nimo wangi ani kega na chi yungu yebi ta chi rawo me bin ne so jara di dungar yimbati ngoisung go das nganju sen no di so ni ni soundan go mara da ro manche soundan go mara da negab chama di ba da ra kyan bi dungar di me phasho ma go chi phasho ma go so 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 ma do so so sem tone di yungu yoba di soro yo mara di nganju non tu sho go sa res so so le da nimo angi so so kenchi rawo me ba che go ya di 디 둥가리 임바 소르투 디 토라 상무스 타마이나 텐데드니 엔도 용거서스 공개에 수 디렌다 그러
The meditation on suffering is something of great importance, but I think it's quite often misunderstood. So one meditates on suffering through in different ways. One of the excellent methods is through the Four Noble Truths. And in particular, when one is meditating on suffering, one needs to come to the understanding that I've just been presenting. In particular, understanding that suffering, what is meant by suffering is not what is the suffering we are looking to gain freedom from is not the core suffering that we all recognize, but it is actually the suffering that is uncontrolled death and rebirth, this process that we have no control over, that is out of our control, that we have no freedom in this situation. And so that's the one aspect that we need to understand in terms of suffering, and we need to understand why we are in this predicament, which is our own karma accumulated under the influence or conjoined with our afflictions, and is in fact ripened by our afflictions. So these are the two aspects that need to be understood. Suffering on the level of uncontrolled rebirth and its causes, contaminated karma and afflictions. This is what needs to be understood. And almost no one does in our world. It's very rare for someone to have actually identified suffering in this way. But for us, it is very important. This is how one develops definite emergence. It is through understanding suffering on the level of merely or just being bound in the suffering realms of samsara. That is what we need to abandon. That is what we need to gain freedom from. That's what can.
인디기 동ар 나츠디 수수 동ar 나츠디 상무타니 민디비 로텔야 ninjons di ha gyurni and di shengto randa shengiga leda nyumo wangi kola kogu yoba dunga nargi yoba chikba imbadi surutone ani shen dunga da tandugi sambajoros di the chansam senanda and the tsigan somebody dardon la shen any chansam means the chansam senanda ninji somebody tichagores leda nyumu wangi any call a question kinchel around me with dungar na devi yang nedent samotang ne shen tindi the tandu somebody la chansam sena dire ninji sena dires I
hope then it's a little clear then on what is meant by definite emergence. And again, just to emphasize, it's imperative for each of us to develop this determination to emerge from suffering, and this determination only comes about independence on recognizing our subtler levels of suffering and its causes. And definite emergence is the determination to emerge from being under the control of our contaminated karma and afflictions. Independence on that. So there's this very clear sequence, and this must be understood too. Independence on the prior generation of definite emergence, which is in relation to one's own situation. So one comes to generate definite emergence by reflecting on one's own situation. So independence on that, we apply our self-knowledge to the situation of others, and we recognize that we are no different from them. They, just like us, want to be happy, want to be free of suffering, but they, just like us, are bound in this prison of samsara, and they, just like us, are bound in samsara due to their own individual contaminated karma and afflictions. There is no difference between us. Reflecting well in this way, so in this sequence, is how compassion is generated. Deep compassion, understanding that beings are suffering due to their contaminated common afflictions and will continue to do so until they themselves bring their own situation to this situation to an end. So this is how compassion is generated, and this compassion then can be cultivated further into actual bodhicitta, which is then referred to in the third line. If you cling to self-interest, you're not a bodhisattva. That's okay.
That ninjong le kalakha ndogero. And that the ninjong re the imbainaya ninjong ran la ya jarchini dunga the tandu samba kiwa tele ani shen la jarchini shen dunga the tandu samba kia di onto la kalakha yoro astro kalakha yoro that the Hikarin kalakha yoro slowly. Muyu nitsu chani shebana lela chagu yosares. Muyu nitsu chani shebana. Ani ran dungar natsula mundi lokiva tele jen dungar natsu samni mundi lokiva di yongoya di ani keche chagoros.
Gelchempore, gelchewa, gosom, yini kade jene kalikaporeng di ingesapo gomasom.
Cousin ran the chama the shen like saving lot means kalakao chagoro.
Yeah, also Shenchen sin shukchungchung yore, jetsang shempegene at ngonegi kola samlotan kalikapore.
Yeah.
There. Okay, gosom. I hope what has been said now in terms of the sequence is clear, because this is imperative. One has to first reflect on one's own situation in order to generate definite emergence, where the determination is, I need to gain freedom from suffering. Then one is ready to apply this understanding to others and can recognize others are in the same position. So this is a definite sequence. However, furthermore, it is not easy to recognize that others are suffering like I do and give rise to the wish to help them. And this is because our own situation we can come to recognize through our own experience. And when we're thinking about our own experience, it's much easier than to see, I don't want to suffer. I want to gain freedom, because we understand why we are bound. But when we apply it to others, we may know intellectually they're suffering in the same way, but to place their needs first and foremost, this becomes quite challenging. That's all.
The one is sometimes the non-true incidents. Norgyo. Jendin sometimes to the Norgyo reshas. Norgyo kaisana. Jesus namjuk mandangwi nisurchi redo asra. As a namju changing by now. Only min namju changing by now. Nedin karina keche di chigiro. Kechong di shagiro. Legaji keche da capsan che da keche di chigiro. The dim dig namju mena. Then the legacy is a go corner. Did the chick what Chagos is?
Whilst it is difficult to make this transition of having recognized that we are suffering and having already developed a determination to emerge from suffering, it is difficult to then say, but I need to help others who are suffering for the same reasons as me. I need to place their needs first and foremost. That is difficult to do because we're very habituated to being at the very center of our own individual worlds, our own individual universes, our own individual lives. And it's very difficult to sincerely put the needs of each and every other person first and foremost. But the reason we find it difficult is because we have not thought about it clearly enough. We need to use our intelligence. So just like in other aspects of our life, if we don't really think through something well, we'll end up spending time and energy in something that's actually not as important as perhaps what we should be putting our energy into. So to here, because bringing benefit to a great number of beings is obviously more important than just bringing benefit to one. This we can understand from many contexts in life. Helping, striving for a greater goal is more important than trying to fulfill a minor, insignificant goal. So here we need to, again, use our intelligence, think for ourselves, and get past or beyond mere emotion. Think for ourselves. That's all.
일단 내가 가르치는 착실 어디 야천부 샤도가나 그러 레처 첨부지 여바나 줌제 야부지 탱거로 하서라 에나간조다 라마 소버름 부치다 라마 이시기 우치비다 오스트레일리아 나라야 초조만 부여라 아니 베나 벤디고 초dengi 초den 저 그런 단다 그런 생각을
Great stupa of universal compassion. Ne great stupa senadrigidu.
어디 딜레셔디 야천부 샤인자 근데 베마서 야우도다 레셔 딘디 또 메나 딜 로그 말았어
네.
간지 간주기 로제 치고도스 진짜 내가 좀 상담 부스토부신 대대와나 간용구요 말했어 인자 다 밀로제 친구지 제고요나 태버신비 로종제 제래도다 태버신비 쇼라에 직장다 란신기 로제 친구 차야지 레도스로 때 딜리 로제 체지 용해요 말다 이 인자 소수지구 된다 상담하되 신기 된다 상담하지 그 신라 때니 소소가 고야 참을로 신라 때니 리고라다 먼저 고야 참을로 소소 란토기 신라 마덴바 먼저 토비야 용야 싸우니 요마라스 소소 수부양제니 신라 때니 용고다 사야 통야 지겨 되는 것이 수술 류치 순전히 시행할 때는 주고 그러더라. 탈두는 산지 공부 토양한테 짜치 뭐 아니 주대야 돼. 시행할 때는 연구여라서. 인제 샴페인 그 사무스인데 신도는 계신 어디래도 디코르도 순거다 간지 다그든 시행나 찬센면스 어디다 소소치 뭐지라 something 간접이랑 나슬라데디더니 아니 사말로 만디고 차도다
To take illustrations from, so if you think of your own life, if one sets out to achieve something that is really meaningful, some large project, for example, you need to prepare and plan well and have a great vision. So you need to start out with a great vision and then do all the preparation to bring that vision to reality. And two remarkable beings who really had this kind of vision, this vision, were Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So in Australia, we are fortunate to have many FBMT centers. And in Bendigo, there is the great stupa of universal compassion. So one can imagine what quality of mind it was that could have the vision for something like this, just out in the Victoria bush. It really takes a mind that is broad and expansive, that could think that something is possible. And look how it turned out. So one needs to have this broad vision conjoined with a deep determination. Then what would otherwise seem inconceivable becomes very possible. When one studies the Mahayana Dharma well, an outcome that will follow is that one's mind becomes wide and expansive, no longer narrow, self-centered or self-focused, no longer thinking that only the minor things are possible, but is able to think like a bodhisattva in all that in terms of what really is possible. So this is the kind of mind we need to develop, this broad and expansive mind, because that kind of attitude, that kind of approach is a mind that can embrace others, that it can embrace the needs of others and be determined to fulfill the needs of others. So this is not how we are at the moment. At the moment, we abide in the center of our universe. We see ourselves as disconnected from others, as largely independent, which is completely deluded. This is not how we are. We are entirely connected with others, so many directly and even more indirectly. Our food, our clothing, our education, the various skills and talents we have all come about in dependence on others. We are mutually dependent on them. Our effort for ourselves impacts them. Our effort for them impacts them and us. This we need to recognize. This will help us break out of this narrow vision that we currently have. That's okay.
먼저 가진 개무셔스나라 지기 농골도 춘전 땅에 제대 로서 식시에 땅서.
So we need to develop from being just a small fan, electric fan, into a big, large electric fan.
어딜다 딘자 어찌단기 남술라 캡산지면은 내가 지금 말하서라 캡산지면 내가 지금 말하다 아니 현대인 삼로다나 캡산 가리어서 다 지와란 신뢰가 다라 현대인 삼로다나 캡산 가리어서 아니 캡산 가르고레스 라와이나 남술 대화 보고요 탈뚝나 대화들이란다 기부고거라 알아서야 돼 기부체들 알아둬야 돼 기부체들 배샤서야 돼 기부체들다 기부용의 체들다 텐즈다 현대인도 상담하이나 기부용 그랬어 야채 야담바 빼디 아니 갈수 없다지 타직도 현대인도 상담하이나 야자견 야담의 기부용 거였어요 현대인도 때 상담하이나야 텔레파비 기부용 거였어요 이 동원이 있어요 난지 소르게 얼마마도
We're covering the third line, of course, and can just change the translation because the Tibetan can be translated in different ways. If you cling to self-interest, that is not bodhicitta. It can be translated like that. It's the without error. If you cling to self-interest, that is not bodhicitta. So in general, and I think if we look at the decisions we make, we see that unless we are going to receive something in return, some kind of benefit, we do not engage in a particular activity. If there's not something, it sounds quite coarse or quite rough, but there's a lot of truth to it. If there's not something in it for ourselves, we are not likely to do something, to engage in something. Because this is what it comes down to. If our own self-interest is not fulfilled, we'll decline. We won't get involved. Largely, it's the fulfillment of our own self-interest that drives us, that determines whether we do something or not. So then, if understanding this, we need to ask ourselves, so if we work for the interest of others, first and foremost, do I actually receive something in return? Because the truth is we want to be happy. This is our underlying desire behind everything we say, do, or even think, is the wish for happiness, freedom from suffering. This is why we partake in delicious food. This is why we have some alcohol. This is why we seek financial security, always yearning for happiness. But if we need to recognize, though, that if we, to the extent that we change our focus on achieving our own interest to achieving the interest of others, happiness for ourselves will also follow. That when we fulfill the needs of others, we also achieve happiness. And even if we do this just from time to time, we need to recognize that and recognize that how good it feels to have helped ease the suffering of others. Recognize that we do receive benefit, even when working for the good of others and not ourselves. And thereby, we will hopefully be encouraged to engage in this ever more, because this is the path by which one achieves the lasting happiness of enlightenment. By striving to help others first and foremost, we indirectly benefit too. That's what.
Teda shendun de samdang wa ina shendun samdang logic ki yo ba na rangi ten de randen la ya ti ro tes chi thaman ti ni su chong ba ina ya ani sem pus to cha ga samanes ti re sam sam ra shen la ya u chong ba na nga mi chi re shira shira kan yu sam sam a din di pe koyang sam lo tang tu chi dinti koyang samlo tanya di chilo ni nyogo chona nyoyo marasrata.
Radical muscle.
Dinti samlo koyang samlo tanya chora. Di chilo ni nyogo chona nyoyo maras. Di sosu sotu garda. Di pento shuyo yuji. Ra. Manzo tesi mandana lamsam pustogo chache. Jinguda. Di samlo jik tangba ina. Samlo jik tang tuba na. Tema tagdo. Ani medraj sotu dasra. Di shendundu. Shendundu sambi. Shengi tuen sambi. Logic yoba na. Ani dungar kandra jik yoba na yang. Dongne che tu yosares. Chanju sambo tsogi. Shengi chedu. Ani sozo pe. Nganzong la jegu chona. Je tu gora. Kasan lodabgun dangi yosa. Di tu yosares.
The mind that needs to be cultivated here is one that recognizes that I'm only one, whereas others are countless in number. So this is the mind in accordance with reality. We are not that special. We are one amongst many. So therefore, of course, it makes sense. Let me help my community. Let me help others at large and ease their suffering and pain. And when one develops such an attitude sincerely, one's mind becomes wide and expansive. One's mind is at peace because one's own mind isn't narrow and tight and self-centered. Notice within yourself that when the mind is getting frustrated or annoyed and afflicted in other ways, at the very heart of that experience is one's self-interest. Recognize that. And at other times, when one is truly giving, when one's mind is broad and expansive, you are not looming large in the center of that universe, but you are part of the whole, helping others. So here, by doing so, one will recognize that when we're striving for our own self-interest and pushing others aside, that if others get something, that's fine, but only if my needs are fulfilled first. Our unhappy we are because our mind is narrow. Bodhisattvas, those beings who have developed a truly expansive mind, they will do and do anything possible to help others. They will gladly take rebirth in the lower realms to ease the suffering of others. And they will not experience pain and misery by doing so, but only joy, because their heart interest is easing the suffering of others. That's okay.
다 현존도 간다진 성당 투그레세. 간다진 성당 투그레스라와는 다 개체종 토니 시아바이노 성당 고야지 차기요스. 개체종 토 장슬라니 미치리 신슬라니 타메. 참메바. 오니 데레도스. 아니 란든도 성당 나시 현존도 성당 고야디야 초지니 찍버려도스. 데오데오 동남문디비 소여바 찍버찍냐래도스. 랑기치도 성당과 가서 수수 데오데오여보다 동안 되면서 란든도 성도 끼기요라서. 데레마도 셴박하여 말다. 균세 셴박하여 말다. 란든도 그냥 성도 땅고 균세 가르스는 가 데오데오여보다 동안 되면서. 데레마도 균세 셴박이 기요마라서. 디 셴을 찍어지냐라. 그래서 간다지 성당바나 현존도 성당고도스. 현존도 성당고도스.
To develop a focus on the needs of others, an interest in fulfilling their needs, which is a mind really of great importance. If one has the aspiration to be a bodhisattva, this mind has to be developed. So the way to develop is through reminding oneself again and again, I'm only one amongst many. Others are countless. I am only one. And I am not more important than them. My needs, the fulfillment of my needs, is not more important than the fulfillment of any individual, and certainly not of the collection of all beings. So there are two points here to cultivate this other focused mind. So the first is to recognize this point. I'm only one amongst so many. And the fulfillment of my needs is no more important than the fulfillment of any other single being, and certainly not more important than the fulfillment of the needs of a multitude of beings. The second point is that at a fundamental level, there is no difference between myself and any other being. The superficial level, many differences, but they're superficial. The deep level, we are all the same. We all want to be happy. None of us wants to experience even the slightest suffering. This fundamental level, we are all the same. So I have no valid reason to place the fulfillment of my interests first and foremost, because others are as important. Each individual is as important as another, and all others are, of course, more important than one. So then these are the two ways to think, to develop this attitude. That's okay.
다들 딘자다 간진 도르드나 샹라 제위 어떻게 고고스 샹라 제위 어떻게 고고스 데레다다 딘자다 디디 제위로 계약이 탑럼 요르베스 라와노 라 탑럼 요르베스 탑시 요르베스 라와노 다 탑시 요고라다 산기기 추 간다 송바이네야 타바 톱고르스 라와노 타바 톱이기 탑시 요르스 탑 요르스 라 람공 고르스 라와노 람공비기 탑 요르스 또머니 또 고르스 라와노 또머니 또비기 탑 요르스 탑 매바지 산기기 싸우니니 송구무다다 탑 땐투고라다 탑 여바 탑 땐투고자 강한수 탑 송샤게 탑 팀간주 라레 마다노 먼저 줄라 인지기 말스 들어 탑 가르레세 디르다 도도 디레스로
And how then to develop this other focus mind? How then to hold others as dear? Well, everything the Buddha taught, he taught to help beings gain liberation and enlightenment. So therefore, everything he taught together with a method on how to achieve it. So for example, he didn't just present that liberation, there is such a thing as liberation from samsara, liberation from suffering. He taught the method by which to achieve it. He didn't just teach that there is a wisdom that understands reality, but he taught the method by which one can cultivate the wisdom that realizes emptiness. Moreover, he didn't just teach about compassion, he taught how to cultivate it. That's all.
다 탑 가르레스 라운디 닌지 계야야 닌지 계서 유디 이동원 통해 드레스 이동원 이용다고 그러스 다 이용다 탑 가르레스 탑을 탑고다 들어 원에 야구 열었어 탑 가르레스 다 제가 심자 탑지 랑기 마치 마 신디 마나 신기 심자 탑지 마타고 그러스 마 간다고 그랬어. 마 말해봐. 마 제용 말했어. 마 제용했어. केवल 토마메 반자. 아니 마 제용했어. 당가 기억하지 킬링 맨스 나와요. 녀도 여러 들어. 마 기억하지 킬링 맨스 나와요. 아니 이따 마무치 때 기억하지 요 말했어. 그래. 마 기억하지 킬링 맨. 나 저랑 개 많아 버려 맞아. maybe 균제 가르스 나와요. 균제 시와 균제 자원인 개운하시 maybe 균제 수직 라뇨요 말했어. 여비 주시 라요를 마도 maybe 주시 양 타바지 단다 버도 수직 라요 말했어. 에요 말했어. 대지디 개운하시 여비 주시 마도 maybe 주시요 말했어. 개운하시 여비 주시 또 성당은 개운하시 켈렌 토에 탑시 요랬어. 개운하시 또야 탑시 요랬어. 라
Develop compassion for others. The method presents as a starting point to develop an outlook towards all others, that one sees them as to develop a tender attitude, a tender heart towards all others. This is indispensable to later develop compassion. So to develop a tenderness, a closeness, a warmth towards all others, the Buddha presented a specific sequence of trainings. The first is which to see every being as having been our mother. So in this life, we have one mother and we can recognize her. She is the mother of this life. But we have such a relationship with each and every being. We've just forgotten because we don't remember our past lives. So we cannot say, she was my mum for my last life and she was my mum for the life before. This is forgotten. But the relationship is still established. So for those who don't believe in this, it would be most likely because you do not accept reincarnation. But what reasons do you have to not accept reincarnation? There aren't any reasons that establish that there aren't lives previous to this. You just, I don't remember, therefore it doesn't exist. That's not a valid reason. But on the other hand, there are many reasons to present or to that assert lives previous to this. That's all.
다 기억하시 요 말스라 한당한 저어야 됐어. 저어야 됐어. maybe 주시 케이셔스.
Dann das Gide.
요 말스라 와이나. 요 말스라 와이나 주시 케이셔스. 주시 양 타버지 거라. 딘지 성당 저와노. 덴데 기억하시라 고아차에 야차자다마다 요레스라.
If you try and if you think really hard trying to prove that there aren't lives previous to this and therefore lives to come, you really think hard, I think you'll actually end up convincing yourself that there were lives previous to this, because one cannot find a good reason why there are not lives previous to this, but certainly can why there are. That's all.
ngala mi ta thobo dindigira labse jagira ta nga Australia drugi ani chöshegi cheris chözalın ro chöshegi la the con the thobo zu akora ta nga thobo khashigi kana shingi den su kola chera mashi chigi su gawshi maresa dindi lamngen dosra kyo
Und
nga
konso chigel gapo yomare, yamane konso kerang chigel gapo mare.
marmari chigi mitso kyo nga shi kor sheba na shera gawshi mar 아니 지기 미소 신이 된소 코르시아는 가오시 말레스 나 믿는디 라우도스라 아고스 나라 이니 상담을 하더라 니 상담을 니 단다바도 최장라 산지비 최장라 개왕하시 코르디 메나 산지비 최디 자연 신도는 깔아가고지 샘딘 다 직출을 대박용에 저러 신도는 깔아가고지 아니 신이 된 수직 매나 추는 셰비 지 람롬의 셰비 또비 용된디 자원이니 귤을 게임도 왔어 다 딘리지 러당샤와나 마셰와나 이니 니셰 유디 추양 다와지 자원이는 로사 말이스 인생이 가드나 가시 땐데 마가 연구이기 때문에 우주견 나랑 강 전부 삼바 남다 시에되기 위해서
When I was in India, I mentioned to some friends that had been asked to go and teach the Dharma at Chenrezig Institute in Australia. Some of my friends said to me, when you teach Westerners, better to avoid the topic of reincarnation because many of them don't accept it and they therefore don't really want to hear about it because they see it as nonsense because they can't remember past lives. So I received this advice from some friends and I thought about it. And I've studied the Dharma well in this life. And from this, I've come to understand that if one approaches the Dharma whilst rejecting reincarnation, then it's very difficult to deeply cultivate the Dharma within. It's not possible to gain realizations of the Lamrim if one rejects past and future lives. So when I thought about that, I thought, well, if I avoid this topic, I cannot then say I'm teaching the complete Dharma. I'm teaching the Dharma in a way that is unmistaken and flawless. So this would be a real fault if I were to ignore this topic. That's all. That's all.
No. 에나타 남아 산지위기 추억이 개체슈디 대버친 무추들에 나왔어. 대버친 무추. 대버친 무추 자와디 닌지에 나왔어. 닌지 기위 탑시 약슈디 탑lâm ni 때다. 탑지 가래 다신 냠지세야. 다단 신이데 대원대바다 동함문대바 냠바임바 디토라 상무단이 인지계단 좀 칭송여었어. 탑시지디 균데맹아 듄세 시시니 마신이 진짜 발게 탑신이요다. 디 고물루름니 진이 단다 겨울음지 파드 탑 딩일 때니 아니 대보심이 최냠스내니다 산지살에 로우여라서 나도 다른 로열에마도 얘가 담가 싸우니요 말 얘가 담가 싸우니요 말다 디 샤니 셴바지 시에데바노 이런 좀 고걸 당해서 차그랬어. 규수 고걸 당해서 이 처음은 다스라. 영어시 돌은 네버 som당 거스라. 아니 수술로 마숑 바이네요. 수술로 마숑 바래. 로 마숑 바야티 마시 바래. 마시 바든 안도 자니 시바다 로 숑 제고 거라라.
In the teachings of the Buddha, the Mahayana Dharma really is of great importance. And the very root of the Mahayana is compassion. And for the cultivation of compassion within, two methods have been taught. One is that of equalizing and exchanging self with others, which is very similar to what I said a few segments ago, where we recognize that all beings are the same. There is no difference between ourselves at a fundamental level. We all want to be happy. And this then is the basis to start to develop an attitude that equalizes and then later to exchange with others. So this is one method. The second is the sevenfold cause and effect method, which starts with what I said in the immediately preceding segment, which is recognizing that we have a relationship of mother and child with each and every being. So these are the two methods. And from they were taught by the Buddha, and through great masters such as Nagarjuna, through to the present day, to His Holiness. These techniques continue to be taught because they are the flawless techniques to generate bodhicitta. They are the flawless techniques that need to be cultivated within so that enlightenment can be achieved. So if I were to ignore this or try to present it in a way without any reference to rebirth, I would be deceiving others. I would, in fact, be wasting their time because I would not be giving them the opportunity to really be able to cultivate the Dharma within. So when you hear about reincarnation, and if you struggle to accept it, I encourage you to reflect on this point. Approach it with a sense of interest, looking for yourself for reasons that disprove past lives. That's all.
The dinza 인질 로장원이 균제 맹아 중돈 로장이디 진럽 첨부 개 첨부 그 쇼인사레스 라 아니 잔줄롱을 첨부된다 소여다디 인자 다조 마시세 마시 섬전 탐제 마시 고야 마체뉴와 신고야디 디 송디 아니 마티 하장기 개첨부이바 그러면 좀 메시지 나눠라야 아직 라므는 소여다 니기 타투가 말이스 니 약슈 니선은 더 초보선은 소소 가서 약슈디 아마드레스 라 디송여라스 디임바디 양아즈의 첨부차사원디 아니 아마다 따와만준니 주거셔딩이 아니 내단 딘지원 미 가시가시 아마다 내주 야보메와 텐데 용시거든요 사위기 먼저 미지게요 미지게 기시자 아마드 수수 아마랑스요 아메 코베 나올래냐 아니 잠종치 아니 기 두신 미참 메요 미요 말하다로 인지 이성당디 아마디 샘나로야 키친 징고야디 넘버 산지비 추나 신도는 키친 무슨 요랬어 먼저 메세나로라 아마치고는 요 말하는 거 아마 슬라원디 빼 마세와 키우더서 나라 아마 슬라원 빼 키우더서 니니마 따와 아마냠 계시고 나 비샤라 양이 아미 파르치 조심 쓸때라 아미 파르치 샤요 니마 따와 아미 파르트 따기요 나시샤 니사도서 고 담들라 아미 파르치요 따기 니마 따와 그 장로간들 아무 par지 아무 같이 통의 기우자다 아무는 기우자는 거 아무 뉘에요 뭐 아무 지워야요 말에 아무 오늘 얌생부셔 아마세 치코라미 빼마스와 님부도스 미츠기 아마 레위요 코온딩가 오늘 same thing 이페 서로 만들어내기도 아마다 아마다 봉기 냠 되는 칼라사기 여번 조금 통은 나 same thing 이란 쇼도스라 기부리 상상 야차 자다마 디 빼얌생도 디 인지미 제고도스라 야월 무지 보이네요 조심 나무 아마 part digdo 야월 무지 조심 나마 야월 무지 거라 아마 part digdo
And the great Lama Chemo, Lama Tsongkhapa himself says that the sevenfold cause and effect method is really a very important technique to cultivate. And the very basis of this technique is the recognition of the relationship of mother and child that we have with all beings. So in this very life, our mother is greatly important to us. She is the one that we have the closest connection to. And I appreciate that sometimes when children grow up and become adults, relationships with their mothers can change and there can be conflict. But even if you find yourself in a situation right now where there is conflict with your mother, still though, she is of great importance in your life because it's due to her kindness and care that you are here. We were all dependent on our mother entirely for the period in her womb and for those years after when we were a newborn and a toddler and so vulnerable. We were dependent on her and her kindness and her care. So no matter what the relationship is now, we all owe a debt of gratitude, deep sense of appreciation for the kindness and care that she showed to us. Understanding this is really important. It's a crucial point in the Dharma. It's a crucial point to develop compassion, is to value our own mother of this life. We only have one. No matter our relationship, we only have one. And speaking then for myself personally, when I just say the word mother, great joy comes to my mind because I immediately associate with my own mother and recall my own mother. And this brings joy to my mind. I still speak to her every day. I have her photograph on my shrine and another on my fridge. Every time I see it, joy arises. Every time I speak with her, joy arises. She is my dear mother of this life, and she will always be my mother of this life, as for each of you with your own mother. So I encourage you to think about this relationship and cultivate an appreciation towards her. And furthermore, just to say from my own side, when I'm out in society and I see a mother with her child, just seeing them together brings me great joy. To see that closeness and warmth between them brings me great joy. And in fact, His Holiness, he also has a picture of his mother on his shrine. That's okay.
삼장이 진짜 딘들다 예자고라서 아마 지오야요 말스 아마 사와 소요 말스 사상 찍만드나 니바 창사 찍견 만드는 창사 니바 잡쳐도 아니 정부 가지 지오야는 잡쳐도 내가 스케면 그 찍야래도다 당보도 만드는 니바디 찍야래도다 아마 디면도 아마 디면네 전에 아마 디페마스도 얌세모래도 오늘 얘기 탈주했어요. 오늘 얘기 탈주래도서 상당다 대부침이 추 자와지 아마디 좀 레고스
I really encourage you to think about the importance of your mother in your life. She's someone that we can't swap. We cannot exchange her for another. We can do this with others, even with your spouse. They can be traded in for a new one. With friends too, they also tend to come and go. But our mother, we always only have one in each life. And now, with compassion being the very root of the Mahayana, the root of cultivating compassion itself is reflecting on the kindness of the mother. That's all.
Ngeda dabadal lagume ma tanga ngara lombala ngeda chötindi shecheni dagam chini samso kurgu horas kurgu yesra ngara phayilo
Karen Payukare.
mitsu tsogbatindi la ya ngara chösheni dagam sweni kurgu yesra konzu gida ngala rewa jawandi ngedindi chigi yes ngedi nangla la ya keran tsogi ani pena puji imbayna kerangi da chomu garo imbayna dra kerangi gemi imbayna dra kerangi amali tsa chi chewayna keran samutanda nor sardas ra keran chambu chede chi susu sasare ani sewa chede chi ina ya amali tsa che tebayna yache gyatama keran samutanda nor sares ra Tilawis, Tinga, this some good dosra. So Sazan Sachim in the Missing Kigore, Chambu Chigore, Nea Amalitzachi Chevana. We Nusula Amalitzachi Reo Marastra. We Nisu the Mintim Samuel Tamana did non true, that the non true said the cousin. We Nisu the Mintim Samuel Taman, the non true race. The switch even non true is right.
I sometimes teach online to the Tibetans in the region that I'm from, and to them I teach in a very similar way to you, and I also regularly say to them that if you right now, depending on where you are in your stage of life, if you have a partner, a girlfriend or boyfriend, or if you're married and you have a spouse, whomever is in your life, these important people in your life, remember your mother. Your mother should always remain the most important to you. Even when you are going out with someone, you're married to someone, and you're very close with them, you have a wonderful relationship with them. Don't get confused. Your mother is the most precious person in your life. You may now be living with a new family. You may be very happy with your new family. You may also be living in a different area. But if you think that your spouse or your new family is more precious than your mother, this is a mistake. So when you think about it deeply, you'll recognize that in accordance with reality, in other words, how things are, there's no one more precious in this life than our mother. And therefore, she should be held closest in our heart. That's all, Ghana.
And the Australia Namala, Reta Australia, no show lomba, the Tawada Anichia, the Luxu the Nuinza, Hamaina, Suzu, Pomo, Tawa Anichi Islana, Kunzugi, and Shedas. Sometimes some down to Mudasra. The Kashikaji did levels, can Anichivana, we can Tawachivana, can Pama the Ta near Rogres. Can Tuzu Manch as a Pamanium down to Gres. Kazi can Chansa Javana, can Pama the Ta little child Rogres. Pama to the Hakuomara. So put the Tawachivana, put the Pamada Ta near Rogres. Some of the dance of Pama the major child Rogres. That chance of Javana. Some of the neighbor the Satan Madana the Kira, Google the Madana the Kira, and Pama Taru Charu. 양생보다 인지 성담에나 딩무이로 진짜 인지 성담에나 파마 있나 보다 부모 아니 이게 저와도 안에 지야리야 겹겨 제 고야지라는 다스라
In Western countries, such as Australia, there's not really much custom for people to ordain. It's still very rare, or it's uncommon in the society. So when a child ordains, or an adult child ordains, their parents are not always so thrilled about their son or daughter ordaining. But the advice that I give the new monk or nun is that by this decision to ordain, you should actually start to become closer to your parents. This you should watch and ensure that that is the outcome. Because in reality, if you marry, you may well leave the area, go and make your home somewhere else. And certainly your time and energy is going to be placed much more so into your new family than into than to your parents. But you've chosen not to marry, you've chosen to ordain. So therefore, you should ensure that your relationship with your parents becomes even closer and you become even more supportive of them. Lasok.
다들이 단이 인디인자 아니 마시 생기 토라야 인지로 자야게 아 개체시 냉가지 윤대맹아 둥거리어스 다들이 셴버 찍어야 이동원 통해야디 탑시 찍디 연den기 찬 상라인 무슨다 지임바이나야 미디 연den기 찬 상당와이나 미디기 레기 찬 상당와이나 메델 가위로 끼그레스 메델 가위로 끼와이나 심젠텔 가위로 끼와이나 심젠디 데와촌나 아니 가와다 동어촌나 민디빌로디 난길레고레스 로 간다 지임바이나야 소차 간다 지임바이나야 콜라 leg bicha mewaji sawin sigma res mu kanda ji mai ne 콜라 leg bicha mewaji sigma res the leg bicha ga ton song tan ya tabshi chebana yasha gyatan ba soso ne ki buyo res ro midi gi yonden ton bai na midela gawi lo ki da midela gawi lo ki bi ka do soso ne ki bu cha da midi gi gyen tani midi gyen ton ondi 마가 올로기도 마가 올로기도 된다 뭐마 소소로 소 마데와 마기베 소발리기도 하스로 중요해서
To develop a close and tender feeling towards all others. One technique is that the first of the 7 steps in the sevenfold cause and effect method, which is to recognize all beings as having been our mothers, and develop a closeness towards them like we have for our mother. Second technique is to develop a sincere appreciation for them. And by this I mean that you value every being. You see the good in every being and value them. From doing this, you will feel a tenderness towards them, a warmth towards them, and that will lead to a wish for them to be happy, to not have to experience problems and difficulties. So this is how we develop a tender feeling towards others. And where you can see the difference between whether you do have such an approach or not for an individual is how you perceive them. If you call someone to mind that you like, someone that is already dear to you, what comes to your mind is you perceive them through the lens of their many good qualities. So when you think of them in a good light because you're recalling them together with their good qualities. So immediately, just by calling them to mind, a feeling of closeness, of warmth comes to them, arises about them. On the other hand, if you call someone to mind whom you dislike, you perceive this person you dislike through the lens of their perceived faults. So immediately your own mind becomes a bit unhappy, a bit agitated, especially if the thought is, I have to see them later. But if this comes about because of seeing them through the lens of their faults. So in this way, we see that if we develop an outlook where we truly appreciate the good in each person, and every person has good within, if that is how we focus or relate to everyone, naturally, we will have a tenderness towards them. So this then is the second technique to develop such an attitude. That's all.
이래다 단지 연댕 초네 각주 삼무당 토바이네 술라이나야 연댕 찬 삼무당 토바이노 가위로 지그레스 가위로 먼저 남러는 송이야 아니 기위신이라야 연댕도 따고 그랬어 기위신이 꽤 맞았어 캡상 소소라인 거랬어 기위신이를 끼운 때와는 종소소라고 그랬어 라 기위신이를 연댕 때와는 기위신이를 대발리고 기위신이 아니 이 다지 망하라고 알았더라 소소는 기위샤고 그랬어 끼운데 대와는 아니 이실레 말에 아니 가야 간지 라야 가요 말했어 끼운데 봐는 소소를 캡사 라야 가요 말했어
Here then the training is that whomever one calls to mind, whoever one meets or thinks of, engage with them through the lens of their good qualities. And to the extent that you become skilled in this, you will develop a closeness towards everyone, a feeling of connection and warmth towards everyone. So where this is presented quite clearly is at the beginning of the Lamrim, where it's presented on how to rely on the spiritual teacher. And in that training, that training includes focusing solely on the good qualities of one's teacher and not on any perceived faults. So by doing so, by focusing on his good qualities, who benefits from that? Not the teacher, it makes no difference to the teacher, but you receive the benefit. And how do you receive the benefit? You'll want to engage with his teachings. You'll want to receive his teachings, and you'll be open and receptive to them, which means those same words will have a very different impact on your heart. So this is how you receive tremendous benefit from focusing on the good qualities of your teacher. And if any faults appear to your mind, letting them go, but focusing on the good qualities. Because only benefit will follow in relation to the teacher by focusing on his good qualities. No benefit follows by criticizing or complaining. That's all.
먼저 끼운 좀 상당되면은 끼운 통인 거랬어 끼운 통해야 뒤지미 끼운 파쇼말이 끼운 요구 말았어 먼저 끼운 통고랬어 그럼 가서는 먼저 뉴문 드립돼 봐서 먼저 말이 드립돼 봐서 대샤 세단 티무슨 드립돼 봐서 먼저 샘비 통인 거 산지라이네 끼운 통고랬어 그럼 산지 좀 되는 잠분에 배를 가지고 산지는 끼운 중에 너무 중요했어 산지를 끼워요 말다이네 산지를 끼운 통고랬어 또 산지를 끼운 때 봐는 산지 전을 주게면 됐어요 산지를 대법 공부하는 산지 전을 주기고 됐어 산지를 가위로 여봐는 산지 전을 주고 그랬어 심전을 가위로 여는 심전을 미비 잠바 끼기 그랬어 잠바 여봐는 소수 끼고 자고 그래서 하다 딘디래다 딘디 제진은 다 간지 아니 잠년지 잔주고 셈세야 돼 아니 딘디 진 다 고미야래서
To develop this training of focusing on the good qualities of others, a key technique is to understand one's own mind and to understand that the way we experience the world is how we believe it exists. And the way we perceive the world or experience the world is through our own mind. The problem is our mind is afflicted. So therefore, the way we perceive something is not how it exists. So therefore, this is the training that one receives in the Lamrim in terms of relating to the spiritual teacher. Just because a fault in the teacher appears to your mind doesn't mean the fault is there with the teacher. This could well be your own perception. Therefore, even a perfect being such as the Buddha is perceived as a deeply flawed being by those who believe their perceptions as being real, as being true, as being in accordance with your reality, despite their mind being deeply afflicted. Such a person then, by seeing the Buddha as flawed when he is not, cannot receive benefit from their interaction with their Buddha. They cannot receive the blessings of the Buddha. So in terms of our own instance here in the training of developing a tender and warm attitude towards all, if we see good qualities in others and the faults that appear to our mind, if we let them go and don't focus on them, but rather bring our mind back to the good qualities in others, only benefit will come to you. You will open up to others. You will develop a closeness, a warmth towards others. And this is the very foundation for developing compassion. That's all.
Dini dirida, da chamyenji chanju sem sam gomni, and samja tamji and the drip to reslano, drip to your maros.
Kuna di yankya suna yakare?
Chamyenji chanju sem sam gomni, samja tamji and the drip to resna, drip to your maros. The gargors will be omani top shadow said. Kanji mariba, danzam mariba. Musun Jomshiki, and his sheriff Omani Toby, sheriff said, Chamyenji Chanju something yam tigo yours. Is that the Dindi sheriff Kiaki, sheriff women to show the Danzan saddles, Zimba Danzan, Zimba Danzan Yona, Zimba Chona, Tawaman said, and the six shivadi. Panji, dark the trouble zip in Zimba Yona, Kanza Digula, Tawayan Tawa Toby. Loyo mares. Omani tobi loyo mares. Omani tobi lo mevaina danzin chom tu mares. Sanji kombo to tu mares. Chanju sem ninji kazugo no to tu mar. Inza danzin jongo res. Danzin meva sogo res edre dosra.
Further key point to make is that whilst it's imperative that we do develop love and compassion for all, if we only develop love and compassion, the benefit we can have on others is still limited. We will not be able to truly act in accordance with their personalities and their individual needs. We ourselves, no matter how developed our love and compassion, will be limited because our love and compassion is not conjoined with wisdom. It's imperative that we also develop wisdom. The wisdom, but here wisdom means particularly the wisdom realizing emptiness or the wisdom realizing reality. These two, love and compassion on the one hand and the wisdom realizing emptiness on the other, both of these are needed. So it's clear love and compassion are needed to benefit others. But the reason for that wisdom is imperative also for benefiting others is because we look here now at the fourth line. If grasping arises, it is not the view. The ignorance of self-grasping, this is what keeps us bound in samsara. This is what keeps our mind deluded, ignorant. This is what prevents us from acting in accordance with reality. Therefore, we need to develop the contrary mind, which is a wisdom, particularly the wisdom realizing emptiness, because it and it alone can eradicate the ignorance of self-grasping. No matter how strong our love and compassion is, love and compassion cannot eradicate the ignorance of self-grasping. But the wisdom realizing emptiness can. And when that wisdom realizing emptiness is conjoined with bodhicitta, Buddhahood will be achieved. Lasso.
Dini tirda ta dangzin do gores dangzin pang gores chikbachi yan danjin nanje dangzin pang bi thap kari yores se tirda dangzin pang yore yo mare se ani didi te ji chondi dangzin se ati kari res dangzin gin zinsu kari res the song mom shuta the things of shuta kechesh the tishabors tarwa.
This ignorance of self-grasping that needs to be abandoned, how can it be abandoned? Well, to abandon it, one needs to understand what is meant by self-grasping, what self-grasping is. And to understand this adequately really requires a lot of thought, but it is still of great importance. That's
Dark trouble in Zimbas. Dark trouble in Zimbas laundi. It's a dinyam, dark trouble said no. Dark trouble said, dark wrong trouble. Dark nga wrong trouble. Danzingi, dark round trouble zingores. Todo sheno, danzingi, dark round trouble zingores. And dark nga round to your ways. The dir nenga diristra. The round to your ways like the round troops round color. The round troops round yen kala ya matemba, madeva. Yotsujiana round trovares. The dear way yomar said dirta. Nganso Ranye kala ya matemba. Chubiyor Veslano. Tadiris, Chuvatiris.
in this expression, the ignorance of self-grasping, several words. From this, we can understand it's the ignorance of self-grasping. It's in relation to the self or the I, so the interchangeable words, the self or the I. And it is a mind, consciousness that is ignorant. In other words, it misperceives the self in terms of how it exists in reality, and it grasps at the self as existing in a way that it does not. So this is the etymology of each word: ignorance of self, grasping. So how does it perceive, how do we perceive the self to exist? Well, we perceive or believe, the word is never believe, but I think it's clearer in English. We believe the self to be independent. In other words, it is not dependent on anything else. Or the way it's also said, it has freedom. Freedom. It is free of needing anything else, of being dependent on anything else. So the same thing, Geshe expressed the same thing in many different ways. So you're hearing synonyms here. The self appears to us as being independent or as having freedom. In other words, not dependent on anything. Or another way it's commonly expressed is as truly existent. In other words, the way it appears is true, is real. This is true. It's not false. It's true. It's real. So these are all differing words to say the same thing. This is how the self appears to us as not being dependent. Then we grasp at that self as existing in this way. And we need to investigate, is this grasping at the self existing in this way in accordance with reality? Then it's a wisdom. Or is it not in accordance with reality? In other words, the self does not exist independently. then it's an ignorance. So this is what we need to investigate, understand and investigate. Lasso.
The round to your by now. Sell need your words. Zuzu said your words.
Going to amso como son.
Round to your by now. I think once the chinny need to watch go words. This all of that. No. Then till that tinza, and ye never did. Manzu Pumungal time. Shari about what child so. Then Na said the countries. And Zuzu, so need you never. Need you never. Was this a diligent? That indeed that Rigo Mambu Sugar, and to zoom in the mother. The Rigo deal penny, the round the trim ever. Round the tribute tomba. Tombani said, so the round the tribute tomba, Jargo Doctor. It round the tribute. Then in join. Then in joins up. Then the tribines up. Round tribute tomba is. The D Namja the shingles. The teaching Shimbana and Mari was said it, dot to words.
Our time is sadly very limited, so we're going to cover something that should be covered slowly and quite quickly. So the way the self appears is that it exists independently, not dependent on anything, as if it has freedom. In other words, truly existent or naturally existent, all synonyms. If it were to exist in that way, in other words, something that wasn't dependent on anything else, it should be findable. It should be findable. So the way to find out if the self exists in the way that it appears or not is to look for it. And where does one look? One looks within the aggregates, the physical and mental aggregates. So the self, if it exists in the way that it appears, we should be able to find it within the body or the mind. When one looks, and this is now the process of investigation, the first point was to see how the self appears. The second now is to look for it. When one looks, one will keep failing to find such a truly existent self, or a self that exists by way of its own nature. This is the realization of emptiness, that the self is empty of existing truly. The self is, and I'm using synonyms, the self is empty of existing by way of its own nature. The self is empty of existing truly. This is where we come to realize emptiness. But the self that still functions, the self that is investigating, for example, such a self is merely labeled by mind onto the aggregates. Such a self, the self that exists is merely labeled by mind. The self that does not exist is what appears to us, or what we grasp at. The self that appears to be truly existent, or naturally or inherently existent. That doesn't exist. It's empty of existing this way, but is rather merely labeled by mind onto the aggregates. That's okay.
Here the Jundi, the Nga said it all, some tango was it is. Right. Nga said Nga Nuson, Nga Chig Mason, Nga Yavuche Mason, Nga Yavuches, Nga said, Nga the Kayame, Nga the country you make taller. When they ship some down to Wana, the D on the control down, Nam down, Jim Deshala Soba, also Zoba, share it, tap that, part to what already, that may become sometimes red or stuff. That much of it, that around to don't suit all there, sometimes delicious stuff.
When doing this meditation, you think of the self or I, the words are interchangeable, in a number of different circumstances. I am feeling hurt. I am feeling unhappy, I don't think it went so well. Whatever the situation may be, there's this I at the heart of it. I am not happy. I didn't like that, or I did like this. This is quite wonderful. So there's always a sense of I, and you ask yourself, this I that is happy or unhappy, where is it? And we engage in the investigation, looking for the I, and we will never find it. This I, this real self-existent I, will never find. And to the extent one does this meditation, it will eliminate our anger, our attachment, our pride, because there will be no I that desires the attachment or repels the anger. So this elimination of our afflictions comes about independence on cultivating this wisdom that realizes selflessness, or the wisdom that realizes emptiness, the emptiness of inherent existence, or the emptiness of natural existence, the self being empty of existing by way of its own nature. That's okay.
In the children years.
Do you have questions? Do you have questions?
Sing it again. Good.
Con Geshe Tsultrim. Geshe ne deni hako gede.
Sometimes about self-interest and benefiting others, we have to decide what to do. It is sometimes confusing. Even I'll give some example. Maybe there's a Dharma talk on that, and the family has a book on the same day. Or another example, family that bring a friend or somebody smoking, but they want to quit. If you bring up smoking to try to help them, they get more upset. And if you don't, how to it's a bit of a question.
Can I ask someone to repeat the question into a microphone, please? Because unfortunately, I can't hear. Oh no. I just hear like sound, not even words.
I think this. You come here, please. Yeah.
Sometimes with self-interest or benefiting others, it feels a bit confusing to decide how to do that. For example, there's a Dharma talk on one day, but a friend invites you for a birthday or whatever, or coffee or drink, or how to decide about that in terms of self-interest and in terms of others. And also, I don't know, question somebody is wanting to quit smoking or reduce their anger, but if you try to help them,
Wait, the second question, can you start again? I'm not getting it. I got the first question.
Sometimes if you try to help other people in a way that you think is helpful, they get more upset or whatever. Something.
Thank you. Deni drea ni kena. Deni rangdön dang sendön. De kola drea yade. Deni tam sendön yam drupgode yamane rangdön drupna. Gagi yage yenamina hakamachung. Penna. Mi chik kon kirka yodu. Deni kon kirkar. Happy birthday. Dini kompena sakang la jo. Dini ngala ketang song. Ini ngangane joy ki dopa me. Dini drona ini konkipo yongere. Ini ngangane joy ki dopa me. Ini ni petsen chung chung chik. Ini shempa ki chedu chikje. Yamena shempa ki chedu majena. Ngagi yaga yina mina. Di rekandus hako gere. Di chikje. Dini nipa. Samsung kunong yang dakpa yodu shempa ropa jegi yore. Ropa jedu konsolung langide. Deni atsu kari shekade. Diniche.
지난 셴 렌체바노 란덴디 다가랑 게 란덴 주인 거였어요. 자, 상기에 란덴 가서 셴데 상단 이 단다지 드리러서 말에 나라 경험하서 성을 싸우니 마땅한 체체 하셔 말라 템포 상단이 로샤비 하나 상기에서 봤어요. 아, 기쁘시로 차서 됐다. 나 김용사 말에 니 내가 쇼도서에 나 지금 깔에 가서에 인지 쌈 대바이나 이 람딘 두요 말했어. 간지 이 소소를 내고 망하지 마도 소소 된다. 이하디 용기요 말했어. 용기요 말했어.
Sungi sepulkoson. Ye dida namdu dria chikio kaze len sepulkyo gide. Shempan ngato chik rekol jena. Yini
이제는
ngato kelen jegio mare yamene ngato samna di yapomindu shempa jena yagere. Ngato kandres mare apgede. Jela. Okay. So the first point to make is that when helping others, one's own interest is achieved. This needs to be recognized because then it's a lot easier to help others. It's a lot easier to overcome the self-interest that says, oh, I'd rather not, I don't feel like it. To genuinely develop the thought that this is not about me, but it's about them, and to take pleasure in doing something for them. And one does so through recognizing this is the process by which enlightenment is achieved, by sincerely putting the needs of others first. And to come to this understanding, recognize that when our self-interest arises in situations such as an unwanted invitation, to recognize that this thought of, I don't really want to, this is too difficult, this isn't pleasant, thinking like this makes us unhappy. So even thinking like that doesn't achieve our own interest, because thinking like that makes us unhappy. Lasso.
jadi 양심으로서다. 그러나 먼저 최고통의 시대학이 현대세계로 최고통의 시대학이 현대인데 최소의 시간이 란데 차가 소수 된다 개체수디 소수 톱당의 약수디 산기 공부토에 여기 소수 톱당에도 들어 소수 톱당에도 아 소수 약부 제도 소수 된다라고 소수 빼도 미약부 미상부 소수 로제 친구 제도 소수 된다라고 디 가든지 디 시행가 때니 연구요래서 그다 야시 찬주 sembol수 오늘 람들 주싱기요래서 여러분 손이 오늘에다서 당한도 최 돈이 상로 마다나 다 람들 가르레스 나오니 ran gel shem pamya de da ta 당한 남 균된 게 있지 네급 캡산 저라도 캡산 세워라 다지 할라사야 베스 엔조스야 수수수 아 지소해줘라 디 람딘 쓰고라 지당 람딘 쓰고라 이내 수수 된다 약수도 디레문도 하스라 됐다 쓰고 차서 쓰고 차서
There. There's young Kikuki kola lapkare, these etigidon.
Yeah.
So there's these English words. So I'm just first talking from the translator's perspective: self-interest, other interest, or yeah. We should understand that this word interest, can be perhaps better translated, but it's a bit clunky in English, is as meaning or purpose. So one's focus on the needs of others is really on fulfilling their deeper needs, their deeper purpose, or their deeper needs. Whereas the self-interested attitude is focusing on one's own needs, one's own purpose. So this is the normal, now to come to what Geshe was saying, this is the normal way of living, where we are focusing on our own needs and purpose, trying to have our own successes in life, etc., through our place of work, but also through eating our meals and engaging in activities. Our foremost motivation is our own benefit, fulfilling our own needs. But by changing our way of thinking, when we are engaging in things that are explicitly for ourselves, eating, having to do some kind of job or whatever, we recognize that this is not my main purpose in life. My main purpose in life is fulfilling the needs of others. In order to do so, there are some other things that I need to do, that I need to take care of. You may have a family at home, etc., and you need to take care of your family. Main purpose, though, in life is to help all beings. To do that, there are also these other things I need to do. So in order to help all beings, I also need to take care of the smaller things in life. So this is a way that we can approach life, approach the various demands upon us. But explicitly from the Dharma perspective, the needs of others, or the other interest, is to help all beings gain freedom from suffering, attain enlightenment. And to do so, we achieve our own benefit. So His Holiness often talks about this. And what it comes down to is when someone really is striving to help others achieve lasting happiness, by that very motivation, that sincere motivation of helping others overcome suffering, in particular, we understand this to mean the afflictions and contaminated karma, helping others in these regards, in that and other ways, we are helping ourselves because we're creating the causes for enlightenment. This is really what it's about, this bigger picture, this greater meaning, not the normal tugs and pulls of daily life. It's about achieving something of great value. But then when one does have to take care of the mundane things in life, do so with an understanding. These mundane things that I'm fulfilling are not really the purpose of my life. I need to do them, get them done, do them in a good way, but the main purpose of my life is something greater. So hopefully that answers your question, your first question. Okay. Die Shempa Gesopa Kolare. With regard to the second question, what we needing to cultivate is a genuine concern for others. A genuine concern for others is a tender heart where one doesn't want them to experience any pain, when one wants to help them gain freedom from all problems and difficulties. And to express this means engaging with others and helping others and being there for others. And doing so, there will be times then, despite really having their interests at heart, they will get unhappy with us. They will see what we've done that's even harmful. And quite frankly, then, all you need to do is ask, was my motivation okay? Was I coming from the right place? And if it was, then you've done your bit. You sincerely tried to help them. And if from their side, they're seeing it in a different way through the lens of their afflictions, what to do? That's not on you. You keep trying. You don't give up on beings in general. And you learn from the experience to become more skilled. But you keep developing your tender heart, not closing it to others, but remembering your responsibility is your own mind. You try to be skillful, but at the end of the day, the reaction of others is not within your control. That's all.
person that is house.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Kenna.
Sorry, you have a question? Then 20 years.
Yeah, put.
It's my best friend.
He's
He's coming back.
coming back.
Yeah.
I thank you, Geshe, for teaching and inspiring.
Yeah.
As always.
Yeah.
The question I have is, I want to know, and I struggle with this question because many traditions at this point in time, there's a silence around this particular question. I feel in that the big question that's facing the planet, if you like, is around climate and the impact of climate change and how that's impacting on so many people across the world, as we know. Where does Buddhism fit in regard to that bigger question in terms of how we might respond in ways that are compassionate but wise? Because I think there's that combination of both, the wisdom and compassion.
Compassionate and wise in terms of climate change.
Well, the impact of climate change, yes. I mean, what we're seeing around the world at this point in time, like there's floods and the heat and so forth, and we only think that's going to be worse as time goes on.
Okay.
And I wonder and I know that Dalai Lama spoke of this at times, but I wonder what, in terms of Buddhism generally, where we think, or what's happening with that in terms of what the response might be.
Dini kung dria namshi gyudok ki kolere. Namshi gyudok. Kini samla dria tis kensa. Kaze kung namshi gyudok ki gyugi kola dria dangi mare. Kini ngato namshi gyudok ki drepu tongdu ngato di kola kari samgares. Ninji dang sherab kandris pecha dangire. Namshi gyudok ki drepu. Dat pena chulok yab de gangla di danta le dugru drogi yades. Deni di tong du also kandres samkades.
The lender told sometime it was. Lender said he told sometime. The you maron was chevana. Jebu dungan jungu yobadi. Namshin kyutok toning on the hago quiet lenders. Indeed, hago was any mount with chinja namsona. You maron mashewa. Lega non to mashi tabshi chevadi. Jebu did on the hago go is that. Serious.
What's happening in terms of climate change is due to the causes that have been created. Where unwholesome causes are created, unwanted results will follow. It's just how it is. And the solution is to create wholesome causes, because from wholesome causes, desired results follow. So where we observe these events, they have come about independence on causes that have been created. And wanting something different, different causes need to be created. Do you want to ask more on that?
The question I have is, as a Buddhist practitioner, for example, where, because in some way I think what I wouldn't like to see happen maybe where it's happening, where people feel powerless over responding in ways that maybe they could, but using Buddhist practice and philosophy and working with others to try and chart a pathway forward. I'm not sure how. I mean, but at this point in time, there are all these competing interests, let's say, around what to do and how not to do. And I wonder where Buddhism fits into having been part of the discourse for change.
Kena kongi drea kiki jeju nge samna kena len kong drea chegi mare. Kaze kong tampo kong labia labgin. Deni nge tsuba jena kong dundak di yare. Deni deng san namchi gyudok dukru dogi yades. Deni nangcho ki wangtu jeni o nangcho gyune kandres shempa ropa jegi yare. Nangcho ki chöpa dan tawa gyune, shempa kandres ropa jegiodes. Netang namshi gyudok. Deni kong di kong ki gyode, yini nge samna kong namshi gyudok ki kola, nangcho kari labgi yodepe. Nge samna di kong ki gyode. Kaze nge samna kong dria chempo tangi yodes, yine dria chungchung tangi yode. Nge samna kong chitang sena, penangazo nangcho zopaki kola kale labiere. Deningazo mampo sig mampo yere. Namshi gyudo kola nangcho kale labiere pe. Nisamle kong didyo nangcho namshi gyudo ki kola kale labiere pe. Pena rangchen zin di gyutso wore. Teni ini di seltop ngazo kare jegire. Karenza ngazo rangwang mepa yin samkido. Kazen kangyo di pe chempore. Kandres di selgire.
저등은 시우셔를 참아서
De kazen ngani sabo mare.
저등은 시우 참아서 임바 있느냐 저기 남시 교도기 가르치는 남신 교도 로고요 세더라 남신 교도디 지당인 교와디 고충이레스 잠블링 교와디 미지기 교와타시 교마리 충이레스 이는 단단 잠블링 교와디 교부 쇼진 교로야디 남주 잠블링 미기 아니 되게 가서 같이 잠블링의 페이지 지야디 셀이 게 잡아인사 교분 교로요라스 딩어지 시리다 자위긴 교와디 그 충이레스 이번에는 교부 쇼진 세 통부 쇼진 교로야디 남주 잠블링 페이지 तायंदी मांगटा गयोरास दिरोस
So that's the situation in the world is that the climate is changing. This is just the natural situation of the world. That the climate is not something static, it does change. It's a natural situation. That being said, though, that it is so accelerated, this is very clear to human behavior, due to human behavior. So because of unwholesome motivations, the human behavior has led to the accumulation of causes that has radically sped up the natural process of change, or radically altered the natural process of change.
yenza chigdi zamble nangala ya penje ya yi cheshi yongi longo chogi 연사직 재개월했어. 정부 시원 재개월 왔어. 연주야기 하장 전부 들어온디 되니 아니 두텐 선자로 써봐 세매버 쓰지로
Mm.
아 아니 거의 조금 쉬어 써거라서 델데니 잠블링 남시디 화장기 교부 아니 교와 대한 두자로 요라서 it is
And there's maybe you could say a special onus or responsibility on those who've led to the greatest impact in terms of the climate destruction. And this really comes down to those within the wealthiest nations, because it's these nations that have produced weapons that destroy the world so and have, in their own way, an impact on the climate. Moreover, it's these nations that have developed the manufacturing and in particular the techniques of manufacturing that has led to our destruction, and it's them that have pushed the, maybe you could say, the financial model that has led to this destruction. So this also needs to be embraced or accepted. This responsibility needs to be accepted by those who have had the most impact. That's all.
허전하게
Okay, indeed. Karma medoma dugma sama Nima dawa boche su chola nambar nyaveya Uzula dambi benjo kusum soba mazangwa mirwa Wanda da jinjin zawa don yuwa
So you can understand that.
Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the Forest Ones by Hester Victorious Losa, Father and Son, to all the masters, all the objects of creation, as this is so the virgin and goodness of the couple sheep is there. Holy is ready, is precious and complete teachings. For explanation and practice, you will allow patience. Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving a single pointedly for the sake of Forest One's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness simply, and from other living beings who suddenly provide to peace, what a great us. Nevertheless, through the unceasing truth of the blessings of the nation of the true choice, and the great ways of bodhicitta of the children of the Forest Ones, may the smile of a reincarnation sweet. One of my favorite things in the person. Lord of God, in accordance with the various dispositions of those who bless the light of your gospel, us, sacred and tradition, essence of wisdom. Dreaming and harmful charm Lord Sandra Vishala Soma. Lord, Shabbat Sumadim,
Okay, you just I won't keep people for too long, but yeah, it's been once. So once again, just thank you very much.
Not the one, but the other one.
All right. Yes, again, thank you so much for coming over during his holidays. I think I mentioned before. You know, Geshe's time off, and he's chosen to spend his time with us. So thank you so much once again, and please come again, Geshe. I hope the weather here is much nicer than Queensland. Yes.
It's okay, so I understand.
It's still online.
Yeah, okay.
Geshe was indicating he's understood, but I'll use this opportunity also to thank you. Thank you so much for your very skillful translations. Yeah, I really enjoyed even all the little translation footnotes, if you like. That's it's been very clear. Thank you so much. Yes, an opportunity for everyone to present pathas if you wish. Venerable Dorje is okay. He can. Thank you, Venerable. I'll be in touch over the next few days. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure and my great privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bima, for coming in. I want you back.
Thank you for coming.
Is motor travel back here?
Thank you.
Pour some color, any color of the right on your.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Ishvara,
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
See you in Bunbury tomorrow.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you.
If I haven't, anyway, but the June the 1st.
See you. See you. See you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you
so much, Geshe. Very good. Thank you.
Probably near, if possible, if they could go near my normal class.
So much.
I talked to your husband. I will see you at Chili's.
So too.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.